Hello. As we noted in the first lecture for this week, comorbidity or co-occurring disorders for substance use are highly prevalent, and they are relatively complicated in order to make sense of causal mechanisms. To give you an overview of what is involved, let's talk about psychiatric disorders in people with alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence. Alcohol abuse meaning in the DSM-4 criteria, people who cause problems for themselves or to others, mostly in the absence of serious dependent symptoms. If you look at this slide, we have on the left-hand column a list of psychiatric disorders that were measured in the National Comorbidity Survey. Mood disorders, major depressive disorder, bipolar, that's both mania and depression, anxiety disorders, in particular, generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, panic disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Each one of these has a lower prevalence in people with alcohol abuse than in people with alcohol dependence, which should give you some hint about the pharmacological effects of alcohol and chronic drinking, and the fact that the more that people become dependent on alcohol, the more they drink, and the more that they're likely to manifest one of these psychiatric conditions. The other thing in the slide that is notable is the odds ratios. So for alcohol abuse, major depression has an odds ratio of 1.1, similarly to, and it's even higher in PTSD, which is 1.5. But in all cases, the odds of having a psychiatric disorder are elevated in people with alcohol abuse. And they're much more dramatically elevated in people with alcohol dependence, as are the prevalence rates. So the prevalence rate for mood disorders is 12.3, and for alcohol abuse, whereas it's 29% in people with alcohol dependence. The slide also shows the effects of the epidemiologic or the results of the epidemiologic catchment area study that was done in the 1980s, which had lower prevalence rates, but still elevated odds ratios for alcohol use, between alcohol use disorders and psychiatric conditions. The U.S. National Survey on Drug Use and Health, conducted in 2014, estimated the number of people with alcohol use disorders, an illicit drug use disorder, a marijuana use disorder, and other types of substance use disorders. Past year prevalence rates for any alcohol use disorder were 17% in the population aged 12 and older. For any drug disorder, it was 10% lower at 7.1%. Marijuana use disorders in 2014 were 4.2% of the population. This slide shows past year substance use disorder and mental illness in adults aged 18 and over. And 7.9 million people had both a mental disorder and a substance use disorder. What this slide also shows is that many more people either had just a substance use disorder, but no mental disorder, 12.3 million, or a mental disorder without a substance use disorder, 35.6 million. But there is a considerable amount of overlap between the two. Past year substance use disorder and serious mental illness are prevalent at a lower rate in 2.3 million people, but still, this is a very concerning issue because it indicates that there are significant numbers of people who have very serious mental disorders as well as serious substance use disorders. Now we're going to go on to an understanding of these generalized data to an explanation of how substance use disorders may cause psychiatric disorders.